Hello, good afternoon. It's a real treat to be here. Thank you so much. Again, my name is Chris Holden. I'm the Chief Client Officer at Recorded Future. We're the largest commercial intelligence provider in the world. And it's just such a privilege to be here representing a company that I've been at since the very beginning, so about almost 14 years, from effectively 0 clients to about 2,000 today, and seeing the opportunity to watch those intelligence programs be built in service of security and risk. And today, having watched all of that, I'm going to spend a bit of time bouncing between the conference's favorite topic of generative AI. We'll talk a little bit about how that applies to intelligence programs, the bigger picture of automation, and how that facilitates reduction of business risk. So, as we can see and hear even from right now, we live in exciting times as it relates to technology developments and very specifically as it relates to developments in artificial intelligence. And you can argue, fight with me later, whether or not we're right there at the intersection or just to the left or just to the right. But it was interesting and validating a little bit in preparation for this to hear Chris yesterday afternoon from Veracode talking about the human engineer production of code and the generative AI production of code and the resulting vulnerabilities in that code being effectively, I'm paraphrasing, forgive me, Chris, if you're here in its details, effectively the same outcomes. So we're somewhere close to this in a lot of areas with regards to generative AI and human operators. Now, we also live, for many of us in our security organizations, in our risk reduction organizations, we live in some dark times right now. There's the significant conflict in the world, maybe the most significant altogether in several decades. And when we look at things from the perspective of an intelligence company and serving teams that are in security organizations, we see this remarkable convergence of these threat categories happening to the point that they've become almost inseparable if you're trying to approach them from an intelligence perspective. And when you think about these categories in the context of one particular conflict, you can just imagine these as like examples of any given conflict, or if you're in a commercial entity, maybe you think about it from an adversary perspective in the context of cyber threat, of physical threat, and of information operations. And here are some pictures where these become intertwined. So you think about an espionage campaign from Russia against Ukraine, you think about the physical conflict and the resulting effects, and you think about information operations that are being transmitted around the internet, and all of these start to come together. And from a security and intelligence practitioner perspective, it's critical to think about these as elements of your programs, of your requirements development, and how you orient those as it relates to your organizational risk. So finally, depending on your perspective on the first 2 slides, exciting in terms of opportunity, dark in terms of potential risk and advantage to adversary, this can be taken in a couple of ways. So we obviously live in a time of rapidly evolving AI. I didn't do the math, but I suspect if you looked back 2 years, the agenda would not have had nearly as much that said AI in the listings of the presentations. So initially, I wanted to offer a look at how we've seen some of the adversary operations starting to take advantage of this kind of technology. I won't read through the full set of bullets, but to give a couple of examples in the cyber category, we think about automated phishing campaigns, about automating vulnerability discovery. On the physical side, we think about the actual manipulation of physical devices and hardware for surveillance, for physical combat. And you think about the third on influence operations, deepfakes, text generation, social media bots. And the potential for adversaries to take advantage of this new technology becomes fairly significant. A couple of examples, not to be exhaustive, but just to get the audience here thinking about the potential here and how to orient yourselves as defenders. Here you have an example of a custom GPT model, an open source model that was used to develop phishing email creation. So you think about the potential both from the content generation side and the opportunity that that presents to be maximally efficient with time in terms of generating text, campaigns, and then, of course, the automation around delivering said campaigns. But this is more about the generation of the text. And one of the interesting pieces is that you look around this event, an exceptional event, and you can feel the buzz and the energy around technology development and taking advantage of these technologies. And this is perhaps an indication that the same sort of thing, this sort of buzz, is happening in the criminal community as well. Another example here, real-world examples of ideating and coming up with text as it relates to disinformation. So you can think about the efforts of those doing influence operations and the amount of time and energy and expertise that goes into developing the actual text components, the story that gets put into these. And now think about the efficiency gains that come with the opportunity to develop text, to develop stories that may be 70, 80, 90% complete, and then the operator, the adversary, can spend the rest of the time tuning, testing, and there's enormous sort of efficiency gain on both the adversary, and now soon we'll flip over to the defender side. Before I proceeded into the defensive side and thinking about how to orient this from a business risk sense, I wanted to pause for a second. It's the first time that I'll use this slide. I'll use it a second time later. And when it comes to thinking about taking advantage, creating opportunities for defenders, for those that are involved in risk reduction in your organizations, there is this swell of enthusiasm around the potential of AI and generative AI in particular to support these efforts. I use this often, my teams use this often in orienting intelligence teams around how to connect their work to what matters to the business from a business outcome perspective. Are the products you're making, are the requirements and collections that you're doing, are they actually relevant to what the business outcomes will appreciate and value and will actually make for a better outcome and result? And I think the same is very, very important as we consider the applications of generative AI. Because it would be really easy to get caught up in the excitement of the technology, the potential, and then start to do things that don't actually connect to the business outcome. So the need to ensure that the organization doesn't encounter financial loss, that we don't encounter operational disruption. And I just wanted to put these out here because there's such enthusiasm every single week, every single day. There is more information about potential for defenders and potential for adversaries. Just on the way to the conference, to pile on to these two examples earlier, I saw one thing come up about the implications of deepfake voice campaigns in the world of fraud, and then another on sort of published on the defender side, where someone had published a new GPT, made it available, where you can actually do some threat modeling for an organization. You put in some information about the type of business it is, the size of the business, the industry, the location, sort of the dynamics of the organization, and it will spit out in an automated fashion a sense of the threat model, where there might be risks to the organization. Imagine that from a defensive standpoint, it gives you this incredible head start on working on it. And if you're an adversary, it also gives you an incredible head start in a different direction, right? So, some of the things that we're working on at Recorded Future in this area, and our mission here is to enable operators, defenders, to take advantage, to maximize the advantage of this increasing data, the technology that generative AI brings to best orient the business and prevent and reduce risk. So to do this, we've built what we call a digital twin of the world. So basically input and information available throughout the world to organize for analytics for both human sort of operator use as well as algorithmic use, so machines talking to machines. The gentleman from Coupang who just spoke before talked about transformers. We happen to use the term centaur here, so man and machine, person and machine, either way, whatever you like, but combining the capabilities of technology with the capabilities of the operators. And then soon here I'll share that we also are developing using generative AI technologies ourselves for automation and augmenting the work of the people. One of the huge challenges with all of this in maximizing the advantages and opportunities for AI is actually reliably combining all of the data that you need to get the best output from the models that you have available. And bringing those disparate data streams together so that you can actually make better informed decisions and reduce risk at the speed necessary. So what we've built here over the years at Recorded Future, and others in the industry are doing similar types of activities, is to actually build a comprehensive data set of threats from all sorts of different angles. That would be from open source, from technical data, from malware analysis, to dark web collections, to the community identification of threat. What are actually organizations around the world in different industries seeing hit their network? Bringing that all together in what we call an intelligence graph that can actually then provide analytics on those threats to serve into organizations, both for operators to take advantage of, for threat analysts to take advantage of, and also to serve machinery and other parts of the security organization, the SIM, the SOAR, the ticketing systems, and incident response. And some of you, I think, will recognize some of the different components here that need to be taken into consideration. But to form a full comprehensive set on intelligence, you need to take into consideration the external perspective. What are the adversaries doing? The external threat surface in terms of your supply chain. What's on the edge in terms of who's connecting to your networks, who has access to your different software systems, who are talking to your, engaged with your people. On the flip side, on the left, the digital footprint of your organization, what's visible, what's accessible from an infrastructure standpoint. And then also the internal telemetry. The opportunity is enormous at this stage, especially given the emerging generative AI capabilities to take unique advantage of the telemetry that this community sees internal in your organization. Combining those brings about some really, really cool and exciting opportunities. So amongst all of the fine print, you think the collections from the different security technologies in the bottom left, combining that with intelligence from the external standpoint, merging that all together, and being able to do things in a programmatic, automated, fully machine-operated way to say, this threat actor looks like it provides the most threat, the most risk to your organization. This malware looks like it's the most prolific in targeting organizations and infrastructure like yours. Looking for detections, implementing rules that would then further feed the internal telemetry from the community, and then starting the loop again. Our perspective at this point, and I think you can kind of see it around the room here, is that more than ever, protecting against modern cyber attacks has become a big data problem. It's also become an opportunity to harness all of the data that we collect externally and internally. And this is a combination of actor, incident response, and the actual proceeds of this, the sort of criminal ecosystem, the adversary ecosystem. But it's become something that in order to protect and act at the speed of the adversary, you have to be able to manage the collective set of data that is available to you internally and provided by some of the technology companies in this room. There's a cat here. Wonderful. Importantly, when we think about the collection and the full data set that we need to be considering as security practitioners, one of the key points and a word that I used earlier was this idea of being multimodal. When you think the opportunity to collect intelligence around the internet, we have technical data. You can think malware analysis, a sandbox, your incident telemetry. You have text and prose that's sort of written. Maybe it's a security blog, maybe it's a tweet, maybe it's a news article. But increasingly, you also have an enormous amount of imagery to think about. You have an enormous amount of audio to think about. Can we start to process that and use that to our advantage? Can we think about video and how build models, infrastructure, storage, analytics that combine those assets instead of think of them in sort of independent stovepipes? And as to encourage the practitioners here in the room to consider, how can you take advantage of those different resources? We know that adversaries will. We know that they will use those. How can we as a community start to take advantage of the multidimensional sort of content set that is available to us to use to protect our organizations? The interesting thing, connecting that to generative AI, is that generative AI amplifies the production of all of this. The amount of content in these different modes is going to absolutely explode because of the capabilities of AI. And we need to think about the ways to develop analytics and process these from an organizational standpoint to be able to reduce risk for our security teams. So think about the problem set: too much data, too few people, motivated threat actors using this, and we need, as a community, to be building AI to stop these new threats. And particularly from our perspective, from the recorded future angle, it's creating intelligence from the proceeds and capabilities of AI. Our vision is that this is a combined effort, of course. The machinery enhances the capabilities of the operators, the analysts, the practitioners in the risk department, those that might be involved in GRC and doing supply chain management. And the feedback loop is one that the human operators and the analysts and the specialization and skills and knowledge that they bring help better the generative AI models that we have. And then the generative AI models create efficiency gains, knowledge capabilities that previously would have taken an enormous amount of time to develop for the human. So now getting back to sort of my roots and our roots here at Recorded Future, we think about the opportunities to automate much of the intelligence cycle. And if you go back decades, all sort of based on the human analyst potential to do collections, to do the processing, to do the production, the dissemination, the actual issuing of it, and then sort of visit back with stakeholders to do the planning and direction. One of the really exciting things is to think about where can AI start to support starts of these? Where can it accelerate these, right? So if you start in the top left, you could think about using the proceeds of your internal telemetry to help with planning and direction. What's relevant to me? What can I learn about my organization to set priorities? The collection element is something that we've been working on for decades, but how can you do enormous amounts of data processing to structure it, to bring it in such a way that you can actually process and exploit it? So we go here and we think about the machinery in the middle. You've got a bunch of text on the top right from a generative AI model that summarizes all of the data from a particular question that one might ask. In this case, what sort of cyber attacks have we seen impacting the UK over the last 30 days? A summary with reference data. And then in this case, we sort of think, okay, from there, an analyst could go and then put together a long-form report that's relevant to the business. You get a little further down, and you think about all of the analysis and the production that generative AI can help facilitate. And here you get into things like actual correspondence with the AI. So you have a chat interface, and you say, first order question, what have you seen? Second order question, what sort of business risk does this introduce? Third order question, like what if something goes wrong here? And someone who is in your threat intelligence team, for example, who might not have specialized knowledge about a particular part of the world that you're operating in, or a particular company that you might be looking at doing business with, suddenly has the opportunity to benefit from the augmented capability of the machinery and the generative AI to help facilitate their work. And then at some point, you kind of believe that it's a shared responsibility across all of these things. The generative AI capabilities help support each of these areas, informed by the skill set and expertise of the human analyst, and then the loop continues. Speaking of loops, we'll come back to this, so I just wanted to remind, as we think about the intelligence cycle, I would do a disservice, I think, to all of the teams that we've worked with over time to not encourage this, both from the standpoint of generative AI to intelligence teams in particular, where remember to think about how to tie together the work and the technology pieces to the business risk. If my organization is deeply concerned about the cost due to operational disruption to the business, how is the technology that I'm using and the work that the teams are doing facilitating that and the better outcomes from there? So just some parting thoughts here. The practice of intelligence in particular and its role in security is being just transformed on a weekly basis by the generative AI capabilities that we're seeing, and the future is being shaped by it right now. And I encourage those of you who have responsibility for these types of functions to be thinking now about how to put these to work. It's going to accelerate the work of both the defenders and the adversary. It's going to be a race between the ability to generate new tools on the adversary side and the ability for us as defenders to detect them. It's a huge opportunity to develop efficiency gains in our workforce. And the key point of all of that is to be able to generate risk reduction by getting our hands around how to solve for this big data problem that's presented to us. So with that, I just want to say thank you very much for the time, the attention. I hope that you'll stop by and see us. We're in the hall here. Come by, see myself and our colleagues, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you so much.